You're listening to The Watchers, the show where two women from opposite ends of New Jersey watch movies and TV about movies and TV.
Yeah, there you go. You got it.
Okay, thank you.
Good save.
I wasn't
because I didn't know what we were going to say there.
Also, movies and TV about New Jersey is also accurate here.
Yes, but it's
movies and TV about New Jersey.
New Jersey. There you go. Yeah. Woof.
Man, I've been...
Good Lord. You've been waiting on this one.
I really have been. I was saying to you before we started recording that I've been... Usually we kind of chat a little bit about whatever we've watched before we get on mic, and I have not asked you yet how you feel about this one.
No. Well, I probably wouldn't have told you because you refused to respond to my Dawson's Creek text, so... I will not be giving you any information either.
You know what's funny is I haven't actually been refusing to respond, but you saying that now makes me want to actively not. I
tend to text you when you're doing other things.
Where did she get that ET binder, though?
It's pretty great. Mm-hmm. I mean, my guess, okay, you didn't probably want a real answer to this, but...
Of course I did. We watched I Saw the TV Glow. I'm Andrea, you're Jody. Where did Jen get the ET binder?
If it was open at the time, she could have gotten it at Boomerangs in Jamaica Plain, which is a vintage store that would definitely have that. It was like a thrift/vintage store. The proceeds went to an HIV/AIDS charity.
Do they have more than one location? Because I think there's one in Cambridge.
But the one in JP closed a couple years ago, sadly.
That's funny. I was literally just in Cambridge 2 days ago, and I walked by a place called Boomerangs. Yeah, the one in JP closed, unfortunately. It was where when I moved back from California and had gotten rid of all my winter clothes because I thought I was never coming back. Little did I know I was moving back to Boston in February. Ugh. I had to go buy a winter coat at Boomerangs. Like Jersey in the winter is miserable, but Boston is just not good. Brutal.
No. I feel like we're avoiding this conversation, or at least maybe I am.
I
Where do we want to start?
Yeah, I guess I want your... I don't know. Like,
I know.
I guess I want your general opinion, but that is a tricky question, I am guessing.
It is. I feel like this is going to feel like a more low energy episode because I have conflicted feelings about it, or not even conflicted. I think I know what I feel about it. I think it was a hard watch. Mm-hmm. It was not an easy film, especially the last third.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
I want to put one disclaimer, I guess, at the top here. Jane Schoenbrunn, who wrote and directed this movie, is a trans person and has said that this movie for them is very much a trans story. We are two people who are not trans. And so I think we can talk about that, especially because Jane has talked so much about it.
Right.
But our way into this movie is just going to be a little different.
Yeah. And I think it's adjacent. I mean, for me, it was like an allegory. I can't talk. It's 5 o'clock. Allegory. What is wrong with my brain?
I loved that.
Oh my God. I just had a stroke. I forgot how to talk. So I haven't. Okay. Well, All right. Anyway, it felt to me like an allegory for growing up queer in general. I know to Jane it was more specifically about being trans, but for me it felt like you could expand out that feeling that they were talking about to not just a generalized queer experience, but to other experiences of being a child or a young person trapped in something, in some place, in some life, in some part of yourself that you're not comfortable in. But yeah, it was difficult. In the beginning, in the first half or so, I spent a lot of time thinking about the visuals and looking at the visuals, and like, as someone who just cares about that stuff, like looking at the color palette, which was pretty obvious in this, but also sort of reminiscing about being younger. And there were certain things that, like, for me felt not Not just references to stuff we've talked about, but just references to growing up that made sense to me. But as it got further and further into the sort of darker part, I guess, after Maddie disappears and things start getting like much darker. I was never tempted to like stop watching. I'm glad I watched it. And it was really like, obviously I've been thinking about it, but I have a quote that might encapsulate how I feel. Mm. I was reading an article on them.us about the ending specifically. And they all there were 3 authors on the article in the conversation, and they came down kind of in slightly different places. And so Nico Lang says, if you're going to give me 90 minutes of oblique symbolism, all soft surfaces, I need something hard and concrete at the end to grab onto. If not, I'm left holding a bunch of marshmallows. And then that sounds a little harsher than I felt, but it also, then they say, I talked to a number of people for whom the ending worked, but that's the thing with movies. You bring yourself to the cinema, your own tastes and desires. The older I get, the more I find myself having a taste for the conventional. And I was like, you know what? I get that.
I think you have we said talked about almost this. Exactly that. Yeah, exactly that on the show.
We talked about this. I don't thrive in ambiguity anymore. At least not usually. We'll talk through the plot briefly, mm-hmm. I believe. I don't think we need to belabor it and go crazy with scene by scene or anything. Yeah. But for me, I didn't want a pat ending. I feel like that would be not true to any experience like this. Mm-hmm. It would have rung totally false. But I did want a little bit of a glimpse of hope. And there was, you could read that into it, but you also could not read that into it. It felt like it was so painful at the end, the experience of him in the birthday party, or her in the birthday party, and then afterwards, gasping for breath, mm-hmm. and after leaving the bathroom and apologizing to everyone. I did read, I don't know if I'm jumping ahead of things you want to talk about, but I did read that there is a version of this on the cutting room floor that Jane did, I guess, write and or film, where Owen runs out of the birthday party place. They run out, mm-hmm. instead of walking out apologizing to everyone in that sort of small voice. So, and that would be just that difference. It would still be ambiguous. And who am I to question a fucking filmmaker? But for me, when I read that, I was like, oh, okay. To me, that would have kept the ambiguity, but you would feel like maybe Owen was running somewhere, or Isabel was running somewhere better.
Right.
Because of the action versus the sort of stumbling. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So maybe before we start obsessing over the ending, we should just talk through how the movie goes.
Yeah, we'll come back. It's kind of fitting. We'll come back around to that, because I have a couple of different thoughts about that. But mm-hmm. I saw the TV Glow 2024 movie, Jane Schoenbrunn written and directed. Stars Justice Smith as Owen, Bridget Lundy Payne as Maddie. There's a younger Owen too, but he's Ian mm-hmm. Foreman, but he's not in it very long. Lindsay Jordan, that's Snail Mail, by the way, as Tara, and Helena Howard as Isabel. Obviously, other people throughout, and we'll talk about a few of them because there are a couple that are well worth spending some time talking about. But they're the main 4. So mm-hmm. Owen and Maddie are 2 friends who share love for a show called The Pink Opaque, mm-hmm. Which is very much in the vein of shows we have covered already. Buffy, most especially, I would say. Not just this isn't insightful, yeah. This is just what it is. Buffy and Pete and Pete.
They used the Buffy font.
They used the Buffy font. That's mm-hmm. right. It's not even reminiscent of. It is just straight up the font that they use in the early credits for Buffy, or opening credits for Buffy. And I mean, if, you know, we watched... It's
on the Young Adult Network.
And they even say, like, it's the last episode in the programming block before they switch to black and white reruns for old people.
Nick at Night.
Yeah. So it's, I mean, it's, and like the fact that the main episode that I Saw the TV Glow kind of works like through is the Mr. Tasty episode, basically.
Yeah. As soon as I saw the ice cream cone head, I was like, okay.
Here we go.
There we go. It's so spot on.
Yeah. It's so over.
Really like, this is what we were looking at in case you were unsure.
Exactly. And I love it. And then of course there's that very quick Pete and Pete cameo for all of 1 second. They're the two when towards the end of the movie when Owen or Isabel leaves her house, the two people standing outside, they're kind of like ghostly white. That's Danny Tamborelli and Michael Morana. And so, yeah, it is hard to kind of talk through the plot on this. So Maddie disappears. Owen lives a very quiet life, still thinking about the pink opaque. It's something like 10 years later because it's like...
I think it's 8.
Well, it's 2 years from the beginning of the movie. It's 1 year later, 2 years later, 8 years later, 20 years later.
Right.
So it's hard to do. And I think that's I think that's on purpose because at one point Maddie says, like, have you noticed, you know, time passing weird? It doesn't really make sense. Like, I think Jane wants us to also be kind of unmoored about what's happening when, which I think is really... it's unsurprising that I'm struggling with structure and how to talk about this movie. But so Maddie disappears. Pink Opaque is canceled a few weeks later. Owen's mom dies the same month.
Daniel Deadweiler.
Yeah, who we know from Station 11. And her husband, Owen's dad, Fred Durst.
Yeah. Yikes.
I think Jane just really wants us to be really kind of like feeling our own kind of nostalgia, but like an unsettled kind of nostalgia where it's like,
oh, it worked.
Yeah, I don't have fond feelings about Fred Durst. It's just strange to have him here. He also only has one line in this entire movie, and it is one of the most difficult to hear in it when Owen asks about going over to Maddie's to watch the Pink Opaque, or staying up late from 10:15 to 10:30 to watch the Pink Opaque, and Fred says, isn't that a show for girls? It's like, oh, God.
Yeah. There were certain things in the very first couple of scenes where I was like, it was very clear that that's what they were doing, was trying to bring back not just the aesthetics, but like the sound and the feel of going to school at that time. Because like the voting booth with the clunking noises and the switches flipping, the parachute, obviously. I loved Parachute. I literally wrote that down. I loved Parachute. The other thing I loved was when they gave us the little scooter cart things that you could like fly around the gym floor on. Those are the only times I liked gym.
Yeah, absolutely.
They showed band practice, which was I was in band till 8th grade.
What did you play?
Flute.
I played flute for a very, very short period of time. It's really specific.
There was a dark room.
I know.
That plays into it, which made me very happy.
That's how Maddie and Owen meet, because Maddie is staying, like you said, Owen is there with his mom to vote. Maddie is staying after school because the teacher lets her use the dark room. And so they bond.
And she's reading that. Yeah.
An episode guide.
Episode guide. I know.
I had Buffy episode guides. I had X-Files episode guides. They might have been the only two shows that I got into episode guides for. I think so.
There was a Fruitopia machine.
There's a Fruitopia machine. We've talked about it, and obviously this is the podcast that we host together. I am a sucker. I talked last week about trying to be careful about letting nostalgia win.
But this is not positive nostalgia.
No, this movie is obvious, which is funny because it's clear that Jane, especially from interviews and stuff, also has a love for this stuff. You don't write an entire movie like this if you don't.
Yeah.
But they're also, I think, very aware of the dangers therein.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's nostalgia, but because of the color palette and the way the characters speak to each other and to other people, like there's a slowness and a hesitancy to everything that they say. And, you know, the same scene with different lighting and faster dialogue would be like fun nostalgia. This is not that.
No, not it's that. Really unsettling the whole time through. It's, I think they do a really good job of, I think by the end of the movie, you are supposed to assume, and I like this, that what is going on in Owen's world is very real. That Owen is Isabel trapped in the Midnight Realm. I don't think it's supposed to be ambiguous. I don't think we're supposed to watch this movie and think that Maddie suffered some sort of psychotic break and that Owen, you know, wasn't there for her because, you know, he was dealing with his own. Like, I think it's supposed to be literal in the fiction of this movie. And I think that feels so true because there's never a moment where the Midnight Realm, where the Owen's reality feels normal. It's always. Yeah.
It's in that same sort of surreal, spooky. I keep bringing up the lighting but it's so overt.
Totally.
Like there are scenes. So they meet. He wants to watch The Pink Opaque. He can't stay up late enough. He convinces his mom to ask his dad if he can spend the night at some boy's house that he was friends with. He then waits at the door until his mom drives away, which I was like, she's not going to normally drive away. But anyway,
we're fine.
It's a split level house, which I thought was very specific.
It looks like the house I grew up in. Like it's
a lot of people I knew lived in split level houses. I did not, but so he goes over to Maddie's house where she has a friend over. They watch the show. Her friend leaves. He sleeps on the floor. But during that time, you know, they're in this wood paneled basement with like a fish tank in the wall that's like casting this colored light everywhere. And it's just every room that they're in has some sort of weird light source.
Yeah.
Whether it's a television, whether it's, you know, a fish tank or
the movie theater,
arcade,
the arcade
games. Yep,
you're so right. Even when even the supermarket.
It's always night. Yeah. It's almost always nighttime. And even when it's daytime, it feels like nighttime.
I could be wrong, but I think the only times we see him in the daylight are a couple of times at school, like when they're out on the bleachers and they have that really sweet conversation. And when he's walking to Johnny's, but to Maddie's, it is often in those scenes where they will cut to something happening in the Pink Opaque to parallel it.
And those don't feel like, it's not like you have most of the movie is dark or moody or at night, and then there's a couple of like daytime scenes. The daytime scenes also feel very sort of dangerous. Like he's walking, he looks very small as he's walking by himself.
He's always alone.
Yeah.
Even the scene with Maddie and Owen on the bleachers, there's so much space between them.
Yeah.
And they're totally alone. I don't know if there are any other people even in the like on the field in that scene. I don't think so.
I don't think so either. But so after that, then we get a jump 2 years later. It looks like Seaside where he is. I don't know if it was, but it looks like he's at either Point Pleasant or Seaside. I would love to know. But we see then that his mom is ill. Of course you know.
I do know. And it's Keensburg Amusement Park.
The boardwalk is? Oh, it is on the beach though. It's near Keyport and Hazlitt. It's just north of Atlantic Highlands where we were recently. But so then we see that his mom is ill, clearly.
Yeah, that's, you know, that she calls it, I think, something like her little health scare.
But she has sort of a scarf on her head, and it doesn't seem like it's going very well.
No.
She starts, not his mother, Maddie starts saving tapes for him because he's still not allowed to watch it.
Yeah, and it's it's very sweet that she's doing that because she's so, she tries to be so reserved, you know, like when he asks about staying over, she's like, I'm into girls, you know.
Yeah.
And then she asks if he's into girls and he says he doesn't know. She says boys and he says, I think I'm just into
TV.
Into TV.
Yeah.
Which I really love. But then he also says, hold on. I have it here. I think that I like TV shows. When I think about that stuff, it feels like someone took a shovel and dug out my insides. And I know there's nothing in there, but I'm still too nervous to open myself up and check. And then Maddie says, maybe you're like Isabel, afraid of what's inside you. So it's, like I said, it's not subtle, the allegory here.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we're seeing him grow up or them grow up. There's some interesting sort of camera aesthetic tricks happening throughout. So there's the part where Owen is in the school and the hallway turns like pink and purple and speeds up, and then it goes back to green and he slows down, and there's the drawing on the screen with the what does it say? The pink.
It's it's Maddie writing all of those notes on the it's supposed to be the notes on the tapes or with the tapes that she's passing to Owen. And it's another example of, so Isabel, and the premise of the Pink Opaque, which I love so much, is
Mr. Melancholy.
It's so funny because it's Tara and Isabel met at sleepaway camp.
Yeah.
Only once, like only over the course of camp. And now...
Well, because they also, like me, hated camp, probably.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. But so camp, again, it comes back, of course. But then also... The reason that they have to meet at the Pink Opaque is because they live on opposite sides of the county. Because they're kids, so that might as well be...
Might as well be other sides of the country.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's I love that. I think that's such a funny touch. But it's also... Owen says, like, I couldn't work up the courage to say more than 3 words to Maddie at a time. So they're not talking in person really either. They're only sort of communicating through the Pink Opaque.
Right.
And just again to remind us that, and to kind of see this all along, that Maddie and Owen really are Isabel and Tara.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In this section, before Maddie leaves town, I was convinced that she was going to die. That this was an abusive home, because there's a lot of darkness up the stairs, sort of like being quiet so you don't bother the parent. Like, there's a lot of...
says, if my dad, I think it's her stepdad, finds out that you're here, he'll break my nose again.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's real like, violence.
Yeah. Yeah. And so to me, my assumption was at this part of the film, because then Maddie disappears, was that she had died, that her stepfather had killed her.
Right. Well, and I think that's what, in a weird way, makes this movie... makes the fact that the Pink Opaque is real, per my reading. I think there are people reading it other ways, but I think Jane would say no.
From what I've seen, I think you're right.
And I think that's where you can get a little bit of the hopefulness, because there are so many stories, and I'm trying to think of an example of one. Was Radio Flyer. Radio Flyer is a great example, and I'm just thinking of it now.
See, it was worth watching it after all. It only took us a year to get there.
That's so funny.
There was a reason.
Yeah, exactly.
You made me watch that movie.
Where it's like, obviously that kid fucking died. And this is deep trauma.
Yeah.
Right? And there is nothing hopeful about that movie, and it is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But here, the escape is real.
It's real. Yeah.
And even if Owen's not ready to accept it yet, you know, there's the chalk drawings on the sidewalk out front of the house.
Yeah.
The last one says there's still time.
Right.
And I think that's as much for Owen from Maddie as it is from Jane for their trans viewers especially.
Totally.
You know? And I think that if we didn't have all of that, or if the Pink Opaque was supposed to be, I almost said ambiguous.
Allegri?
Jody, we are struggling today. If it was supposed to be ambiguous, that hope isn't there. And you do have to, because Maddie doesn't come back. Owen says, I never saw Maddie again. Maddie could have died later. If we're accepting that maybe this is a story about why it's dangerous to lean too heavily on a make-believe world, blah, 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 blah. But I don't think that's what Jane wants us to think, thankfully.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're totally right. That is the feeling at first.
Yeah, I felt like one of them was going to die. Mm-hmm. I also felt like, even though I know that they're representing two characters or are two characters in this TV show, they also felt like two parts of the same person. Mm-hmm. And so it was also like, it felt like an internal battle in a way when he was battling Maddie.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting.
Like she's the braver part of him or something, you know? But when we jump to 8 years later, he's about 22 and he's working in a movie theater. I literally wrote, does he work in a movie theater? Oh, Andrea.
It's not like I knew when we started this podcast that this movie was even going to come out. But everything we've been doing has been leading up to it.
There were a couple of visual things that they mean, I don't know what they mean, but to me, I noticed them. One, when they were in the school in the beginning during the voting, there were all of these upside down tables scattered throughout the gym that looked almost like horseshoe crabs or something, like flipped upside down. And then in this scene in the movie, there are shopping carts scattered around the parking lot in a very similar way to the flipped upside down tables where they were just like, it looks like they were like scattered and aliens came and took everyone away.
Abandoned, yeah.
I don't know what it means, but I definitely noticed it.
I hadn't thought about how few people are actually in this movie. Like, there's that empty grocery store is unsettling, especially like you said, when you see those carts that do feel abandoned. It's also like we never see his friend Johnny that he used to be staying with, whose house he used to sleep over at. Yeah. There's also at the end when he says, like, I've got a family of my own now and they mean everything to me, whatever. We never see that family.
We never see him. I know. All. Yeah. So we get him on the way home from working at the movie theater. And I guess in his mom's car, we recognize it from before. And there's like a downed line. It looks like almost in the road, but also the road looks like there's something going on under it. And the pages of the book are flying around. And it's like, it was a confusing moment for me watching it. I figured, I kind of got there later, but it was like, again, you're not sure yet what is the real world and what is not the real world.
Right. Well, and especially because Maddie's not stuck in a book. So, you know what I mean? Like, and also the way Maddie tells it, because it felt to me watching it the first time where I was like, oh, this is how Maddie comes back through some weird portal or something that opens up on the road. But when Maddie tells the story, it's not really how it happens.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I didn't follow the middle part of this movie as well as I wanted to. I also only watched it once because I had rented it. But they end up in some some sort of middle. It almost felt like a middle space, like a club where there's people on stage.
Hold on, we're going to have to spend a lot a talking about Double Lunch because 100%. You're so right.
Did I say something smart without realizing it?
I think so much of I think it's okay that we're confused and that the plot is swimmy and slippery. I do think that's part of it. So I'm okay with the fact that like there's like it's hard to like grab onto some things.
Yeah.
Double Lunch is the name of the like town bar where the bands play in the Pink Opaque.
Right.
Just like the Bronze. And it is the one place that is showing up though in the Midnight Realm. So it's like Maddie says, I know somewhere safe we can talk. And it's like, again, it's like the Bronze and Buffy, but it's also like, and I only know this because I read so much about Twin Peaks after we watched it. There's the Lodge, which is but then in between there's a, I don't remember what it's called because it was so long ago, but there's a space in between where both of the two, and obviously this is we haven't even mentioned Twin Peaks yet, but like, obviously,
of course,
obviously this is Lynchian, like it just is. It's another one that you can't. And so I love the double lunch because I love the bronze. And something, when you only watched that one episode of Buffy, but the bronze
I watched a couple more, but okay.
Yeah. But the bronze is where real, in our world, music acts will show up and play. Michelle Branch has a really, iconic appearance. And so here we have, so there are two. One is Sloppy Jane and Phoebe Bridgers playing Claw Machine. And then after that, after Owen and Maddie are done kind of talking, King Woman plays another song, plays Psychic Wound. And I know that it was really important, it seems, to Jane to include artists that were queer and that had something to say and that were current but had a sort of like kind of like aesthetic that makes sense. This feels like these artists could have existed in whatever it is, 2000. What year would that be at that point? 2006.
I have no sense of time in this. Yeah. But this is where that conversation happens that you brought up before, where she talks about time moving strangely, and he sees a flash of himself wearing her dress, or wearing a dress as Isabel, possibly. But in Maddie's house, it's like the things are starting to cross and get confused as to what is in one world and what's in the other.
Exactly.
And she says he wants to go to the police because he's still living in the world where she disappeared and she has been found. And, you know, she needs to let everyone know she's still there. And she's like, you're not getting this at all.
Right. Yeah, it is. It's funny because she weirdly, like, she tells Owen the story of what happened. She gets a really long monologue. It's like, it goes on for a very long time. And Owen pushes back a little bit a couple of times, but there's not much back and forth. It's like Owen's not her ready, narrating. So she just, she kind of just like, this is where I'm at. This is what it's like. This is how it happened. But there's not like a huge debate or her really begging Owen to do what to do what she needs to do to become Isabel.
Yeah, she says you can't tell anyone, not like last time. And it feels a little bit like, because she wanted Owen to come with her. Maddie wanted Owen to come with her when she first disappeared, and he didn't. And he was obviously like that scene where he goes to his friend Johnny's mom and is like crying because he says, like, you know, he wants to get in trouble so he can't go anywhere.
He's so passive in this movie. Like, he can't just tell.
He's totally frozen the whole time, just like stuck.
Yeah. And you don't know who that is or why it's so important that it's Tara, but Tara is, if you watched Buffy, she's the love of your life. And I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but it is just to watch her be an adult who is like caring for a young queer person is it's beautiful. I love Tara so much. Did I say she's from Buffy? Yeah, I did.
Yes.
I didn't just start talking about. Okay.
No. But this is like, we were holding on to a little bit of reality up until the point where Owen sees the power line in the road and then has the conversation in the double lunch. And after that, for me, I understood what was happening and I was okay to go along with it and see where it went. But this is where I started to say, okay, this is why I think this movie is just... This is where I am not suited for this part of this movie. Because it's too... I'm such a fucking concrete person. You know? I'm like...
I get it.
What is happening for real?
Yeah.
Like, you know, I'm just...
Well, I think it's here. I think all along there are moments where Isabel, Owen, there gets like up until this like last third, or it's like the last 20-ish minutes, glimpses of Isabel being a real part of him, right? Like when Owen's dad comes home and Owen has his head fully in the TV, and Fred rescues him, and it's obviously because maybe obviously isn't the right word, but it seems to me that Fred is there as a extension of Mr. Melancholy and is keeping Owen from being able to actually escape. And so there's a little bit of that bleed in, but I don't think up until Maddie, Owen realizes that's what's going on. I think it's all very subconscious. I think once Maddie shows up inside, Owen knows that she's really Isabel, but is fighting it so hard. And that's why it's so strange, even more ambiguous. Again, ambiguous. Even more ambiguous.
Little peek behind the curtain. We never record at night, and this is why.
No. And it's 6 o'clock on a Wednesday.
At night, 6 o'clock.
I'm sick.
Yeah.
Like, there's just this is
no
all
good.
None of this makes any sense.
Yeah.
But so
I want to go back really quick to her monologue and the story she tells about what happened after she left, because I found it was simultaneously this sort of out of body, strange, like dreamlike sequence of events. And at the same time, this is why I said this is going to be hard to talk about, because I think that there's a lot in here that's extremely like deep set, like core memories of being a queer kid and being terrified all the time. And so when she talks about, she goes to work she started using a new name. She made it to Phoenix. She gets a job at the mall, filling dolls up with stuffing. Something wasn't right.
Build-A-Bear.
Yeah, Build-A-Bear. Something wasn't right. Time wasn't right. She paid a kid $50 to bury her alive. Like, this whole section, even though to me it was a little bit arbitrary is the wrong word, but I wasn't entirely sure what all of the beats of the story were there for. The general sort of darkness and terror and feeling very like lost and alone and fearful, that rang extremely true. So, yeah.
I mean, this movie is so, it's like such a vibe, you know?
It's such a vibe. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's why, like I said, I took a ton of notes. None of them make any fucking sense now, because all I needed to really do was think about the vibe, because I think this is why I get frustrated with movies and TV like this, because there's a part of my brain that just wants it all to fit together like a puzzle and make sense. And this is not going to ever do that. It's not supposed to.
But it's funny because you're right, but also, like, there's a reason it's difficult. Like, I've said this already, but that it's difficult to kind of pinpoint what happens when and how much time has passed and what's really going on and how much is real and how much is not. But also, this is a movie about two kids who loved a TV show, and it turns out they're actually from the TV show, and one of them goes back to the TV show and the other one doesn't.
Right.
Like, both of those things are true.
Yeah. But once it hits this monologue of hers, it just keeps going downhill. And this is where, like, we're watching Owen find it harder and harder to breathe. And it's harder and harder to breathe in the movie watching it. Like, it just is getting harder and harder to be there. Because he says right before... So it's this weird sequence where they're in a double lunch. She's trying to tell him that they are Isabel and Tara, and he's not seeing it. And he says, "This isn't the midnight realm, Maddie. It's just the suburbs," which I thought was a great line. But there's this whole burial theme that makes a ton of sense given what we know about the reasoning behind this film. But Owen doesn't let Maddie bury him. He knocks her down and runs away. And then right after that, you hear him kind of say, "It's always night now. I locked myself inside. I never saw her again." And then you see there's still time. And then we go to basically the final bit But it just keeps getting darker and darker and tighter and like harder and harder to feel like there's any escape or any way out, right?
Even that, like, I don't know. Hold on. I'm thinking too much about the thing I'm about to say, but there's something to the fact that, like, he's worked at this movie theater all this time, and then that scene could have happened at the movie theater. I worked plenty of birthday parties at my movie theater that made me want to scream until everybody stopped talking, for sure. But the fact that, like, he's so separated now from anything from before, like, he's even in he's at the fun center, and again, there's no real reason to do that other than to alienate him even further from, and us too, from anything we knew before in the movie. And the fact that
isn't the only connection that one of the guys used to work in the movie theater.
Yeah, his
and that's
manager
why he's
brought him.
Yeah.
And it gives us even more of, like I said a few minutes ago, Owen really fighting to repress everything. That the arcade games are all winking at. There's Mr. Melancholy. There's a Marco Polo arcade game, so that Owen can tell himself, and the viewers, if they want to, can tell themselves that it's all in Owen and Maddie's head.
Right.
But I think what it's actually supposed to tell us is, like, no, it's very real, and it's bleeding into their reality. He's just ignoring it.
Right. And so I wrote, like I said, my notes make no sense, so I apologize. But after he says, I never saw her again, I wrote down, now it's day, ? What if he was someone beautiful and powerful on the other side of the screen? There is still time. And then I just wrote in all caps, and I don't remember how this switch happened, but I wrote, the ball pit, Andrea.
His job.
Because we had a extremely long conversation about whether or not you could drown in a ball pit, like last year, or be buried alive in a ball pit.
Exactly. And his job is to replace the balls in the ball pit.
Yeah.
To make sure that everybody can stay buried. It's so funny. I forgot about that.
Where's the room in your house where the red string and the like map of all of this is?
It's right here in this podcast.
I know. The ball pit thing was just like, oh my God. But then we find out his dad finally died. And he says, that it's time for him to become a man, which is such a loaded, a productive member of society.
Yeah.
This is where he says he got a family of his own, even though we never see them. I just wrote the angles in this are wild. The camera work, it gets weirder and weirder throughout. Like in the beginning,
and it starts out a little strange.
It starts out pretty weird, but in the beginning, I think it's more lighting. The camera work is strange, but it's like just off center strange. It's not fully just unrecognizable, but it changes towards the end. Yeah. And he's been talking from a fire this whole time. He puts the fire out. Yes. Telling stories around the fire.
Are you afraid of the dark?
Oh, yeah. Are you afraid of the dark? Sorry. I don't know why I said Goosebumps. We never even watched that. Yes. Are you afraid of the dark? I wrote down "So Pete and Pete!" ! And I'm not sure why. What happens right after this? Is it the soup party?
Yeah.
Like I said, my notes make no sense.
Again, because this movie he puts the fire out, and then he says, anyway, like I was saying, it was raining the other night, which is pretty much how the movie opens. And he says, and I went back and watched an episode of The Pink Opaque. It's available to stream now. So that part is not so Pete and Pete, but whatever. And yeah, so it's so Pete and Pete because it's back to their ice cream man, whose name I forget, says, like, oh, I wish that I didn't have to go away in the winter.
There we go, yeah.
And then the thing that's not so Pete and Pete, because Pete and Pete doesn't suffer from the thing that many children's shows do, where it does let you sit with sadness and nostalgia and bittersweetness, is they're like, you should sell soup instead. Let's have a soup party.
Right. The easy flip answer of, now we've solved the problem.
Exactly. And he says, like, it looks so cheesy. It's not what you're, and it's, are we supposed to think that this is adult eyes watching it? Like when we watched Zeke the Plumber, and as I said, it's still frightening to me, though only because it was so frightening as a child, and you were like, that mask is stupid, why does he have a nose?
Yeah.
And or is it that it really has changed, you know, especially because it's for Owen, it's going to be that much easier for him to think Maddie's crazy if he watches it now and it doesn't have the same effect it did on him as a young person.
Yeah. I think there's also something in there, and I'm just kind of spitballing, but about when you live your childhood in hiding and you look back at pieces of it, it's so common for it to feel completely different than you remembered it. Even if you didn't grow up in hiding, but if you did, it's like you can look back at things that were extremely meaningful to you when you were growing up, and they're not what you thought they were.
Right.
And I know that, you know, this is supposed to be a real place and this is his real life that he's looking at and seeing in a different way, but I don't know.
It again is another thing of, I keep being like, it just is, this is the reality, this is what this movie is saying, but that's how it's helpful and how I want to watch this movie, right? And so and Jane,
because
too,
if it's not real, it's just cruelty. It's just misery if it's not real. So it kind of has to be real.
But I think that if somebody watches this movie and doesn't see it that way and then isn't satisfied by it, I think that's also valid. It's just not, you know.
Yeah, and I kind of wasn't either of those two things. Like, I can accept the idea that, like, the thing that you get to save you from just despair watching this film is the fact that this is a real place and that, you know, there is still time, like it says.
Right.
But also, I would have liked a little bit more reinforcement of that in one or two small ways, just to kind of make it feel like there was a little bit more hope. And I get it, like, not to be super dark, but like I feel like I should have a trigger warning or something, but like the suicide rates amongst trans people are extremely high. Yeah. Many people who have to deal with the way society treats this part of the LGBTQ community like don't make it.
Right.
You know? And so I think that's why it's so easy to go to the absolute darkest interpretation. Because that's also a real thing. And, you know, we're watching him stop being able to breathe. He's using his inhaler all the time. He's getting weaker. He's turning gray. He looks very sick. I wrote down he looks like during the 80s. I was thinking about all the images that we saw of people that were suffering from HIV and AIDS. And that is what this reminded me of. But this last section is extremely difficult.
It's really, really hard. And it is, and like I get the feeling that Jane wants it. I mean, obviously wants it to be hard, but I mean, it is like, in a sensory way, it is hard. Like Owen breathing that way, it's not just difficult because it's like, oh, he's clearly struggling. It makes it hard for me to breathe while I'm watching it.
Well, the sound is really intense. Like the way that, and I watched it on a TV in my house, not in the theater. So I can't even imagine being in the theater and having that surrounding you. But yeah, the sound was really intentionally present in the breathing parts, you know?
Exactly.
And then he screams.
That scream.
Yeah. I mean, we've all wanted to do it at some point, you know? Like, I think that's why when we started and I said this was rough. This specific section, it's like we've had so much fun talking about all of these shows, and then there's this scene that is just so fucking real to the experience of being a fucked up queer kid and like bullied near to death, and like, you know, the whole experience of being just like, it captures that feeling so well that I hate it. You know, like I don't want, like I've spent 40 years trying to get away from that feeling, you know, like to see it represented visually and sonically in a way where you can't really escape it. It's like, I don't need to feel that again. I remember that. Like,
yeah, I mean, you're totally right. Yeah. I do think there is, in a weird way, something also a little positive about that Scream, because it's, and then it's countered immediately by his being like, oh, ignore me, I'm sorry, you know, but that he is like, that's the biggest reaction to anything we have gotten from Owen this
well, like you said, he's
time.
Been quiet the entire time. He speaks slowly. He speaks very like low and quiet. Yeah.
I think if we think of this, it's a movie, but it's easy to also think of it as a TV show. And that makes me feel a little better about the ending too. Because it's like, you know, theoretically we could be gearing up for another season of this show.
I mean, Jane has mentioned the idea of a sequel.
Well, yeah. So did you hear about their, I forget what they're calling it, their screen trilogy? So they did We're All Going to the World's Fair, which is, I think, a little more of a straightforward is not the right word. It's genre-wise, it's more of a horror movie, but it's also about connection and community and queerness and transness. And then there's this. And then they had written what they had imagined to be the first 2 seasons of a 3-season TV show that they couldn't get anyone to pick up. And so now it's going to be a book, or at least I think it might be a trilogy of books, actually. And the first one will be out at some point, and it's called Public Access Afterworld.
Interesting.
And so all I know about it so far is that it is about, I think, another realm, but that is that communicates with our world through a public access television network.
Interesting.
So I'm very excited for that. So I don't know if we're going to get a direct sequel to I Saw the TV Glow. I hope that they don't, because I don't know that there's a way to do it that isn't either too tidy or too sad. Like, because the only way, either Owen transitions or Owen doesn't, you know, either Owen goes back to being Isabel or not. Those are kind of the two options. And I don't know I don't know what a whole movie of that would be.
That same article that I was talking about in the beginning from them, there are 3 people having a conversation about the film, and Samantha Allen, after the previous quote that I read about wanting something concrete or wanting something conventional, she says, what my heart wanted was for Owen to wake up as Isabel, take Tara's hand, and look up defiantly at Mr. Melancholy. But I know that'd be too convenient of an ending. Right. And this is when they mention the idea of the running ending instead. And so Samantha asks, to wrap things up, how would you feel about the running ending? And do you think a sequel is the right move, or are we just better left grappling with what we've got? And so the third person in this article, Abby Montiel, says, look, I'm biased. Amid the glut of sequels and IP-driven material that seems to clog up the box office on any given week, a singular queer horror movie that doesn't offer easy answers getting a wide release already feels like a minor miracle. As much as I would have liked to see Owen fully enter the pink opaque, I have to admit that I have a reflex against unplanned follow-up films. And then this is the part that I really wanted to read. They say, as devastating as the third act of I Saw the TV Glow was, Maddie and Owen felt instantly recognizable to me as 2 versions of how the lives of isolated, closeted queer kids can play out. Clawing your way out of suburbia and trying to bring that buried part of yourself to the surface, or pushing it down and trying to assimilate even if it kills you. I want to believe that Owen gets to a better place, but unless Schoenbrunn comes up with a story that they feel like they need to tell, I'd much rather see them get the chance to spend their hopefully incoming blank check elsewhere. So yeah,
we'll see. I think that's how I feel too. I feel okay telling myself that Owen needs some more time, but we'll get there, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole message of the literal language scrawled on the ground, right? Yeah, I feel like I haven't, even though I watched this over a week ago, I think at this point, I don't think I have fully settled on how I feel about it.
I still feel that way. And I'm as primed to love this movie as possible. And like I said, and have said, I do love this movie, and I still have complicated feelings about it.
Yeah. Because I don't know that I would say I love this movie. I love that this movie exists, and I'm interested in this movie, and I am glad I watched this movie. But I can't say, not that I was supposed to, but I can't say that I like enjoyed the experience.
Right.
And I've always been the type of person that if I have an association with a song that brings me to a place I don't want to be, I cannot listen to that song. And that is weirdly how I felt about the last third of this movie. Was like, I don't want to go here.
I totally get that. Yeah.
Like, and maybe I would feel differently if my experience was that of a trans person and not that of a queer kid, in that there's a lot of specificity, I think, that can be read into it if you're looking at it as a trans allegory. They talk about in this article, when he has that scream moment, the article says, only at a children's birthday party does he finally have what many trans people refer to as, quote, an egg crack moment. In the movie's most visceral sequence, he slices open his own chest to discover that his insides have indeed been replaced with static.
I think that's right. You just made me think of when you said a song. I said earlier, just to talk a little bit more about the soundtrack real quick here. I said it earlier, it's all original music. That's not true. There are two covers. One is Yule did a cover of Broken Social Scene's Anthems for a 17-Year-Old Girl. Perfect. And then there's also Snail Mail's cover of Tonight Tonight, Smashing Pumpkins, which is perfect because obviously Mr. Melancholy looks exactly like, especially the scenes when they're at the sleepaway camp, they're at the end of the dock. Now, I don't even remember. It might actually be Owen and Maddie in that scene, not Isabel and Tara, but they're at the end of the dock later and the moon is in the sky and it looks like the Tonight Tonight video.
Right.
So much.
Huh.
And so that's all. It's all like in there. The rest of it is all new stuff. But Mr. Melancholy, literally from an album called Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. Like it's all talking to itself and to the things before it. Also, Marco and Polo look like characters out of an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark? They're so spooky, but weird, but in a way that is like
a kid made them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, same thing with the moon. There's a lot of the characters and scenery in the show itself that is very, like you said, reminiscent of Are You Afraid of the Dark? And shows of that time that were, looking back, a bit corny in the way that they were, like the mask on the plumber, Zeke the plumber's face, all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I feel like I'm probably not done thinking about this, but certainly was interesting to do it the way that we did it. I'm glad we did, like having all, because that's the thing for me about this movie is that emotionally, the references are there, right? I get the references to the guts parts of it, right? The parts that are about the physical and mental experience. But all of the pop culture references are from 10 years after I was a kid. You know, Jane Schoenbrunn is 37, I believe.
Yeah.
So
I wonder too. So it's not even just like, and now you know most of them because I gave you and our listeners a little syllabus to
a primer. Yeah.
But
a literature review.
But I can imagine that it's not like I get a lot of comfort from recognizing those things in this movie that probably isn't there for you. And so for you, this is a movie where like, I understand these references. And then you have a third of a movie that is brutal. I go in and I don't feel good watching this movie, but there are things for me to hold on to in the same way that there are things for Owen and Maddie to hold on to that feel good for me.
I think that's why I was better with the first third, because there were things that I recognized. It wasn't pop culture stuff, but it was like physical experiences of the parachute, the voting booths, the way that the school is a different place when it's being used for adults, and how it feels like you're in another world. Like all of that, the dark room, you know, I have a little nit to pick about the darkroom door, but that's no one cares. There would never be just a door to the hallway. Julie. I know, okay. But there would never be just a door to the hallway. You have to have either like a winding hallway to block the light or a circular door.
Gotcha.
No one cares. But like there was more for me, I think, to hold on to reference wise not in the TV show itself, right? Mm-hmm. But in the world.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause even like, man, I hadn't even thought about that. Cause like including Tara is a good Amber Benson. I shouldn't call her Tara, but she's Tara and she knows she's Tara. Like for me, I'm like, oh, it's interesting. Like Jane included Tara as a little nod to Buffy, but it also was soothing for me in a way it wasn't for you. You're like, oh, there's Johnny's mom. Who cares? But for me, I'm like, oh, this is a really difficult movie. And I feel so much for poor Owen, who has nobody and really feels kind of isolated. And then to see him interact with someone who means so much to me,
right,
is soothing. And you don't have that experience. So that's, yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it definitely, it left me without the comforting parts, but with the sort of very visceral memories of the feelings involved, you know, which I'm not a fan of.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. Not Jane's fault.
No,
but the feelings are not good.
No, they're not good to feel. I wonder who Jane was imagining as their ideal audience member. Is it somebody in their, middle age, late 30s, early 40s? Is it a younger not that, I mean, I think Jane started writing this movie, I think just a few months after they started transitioning, or started taking hormone replacement therapy anyway. And so it's not, I shouldn't say that like obviously not only young people, only young trans people need this message.
Sure.
But it just, yeah, I don't know. I don't have a fully formed thought there, but I do wonder who Jane thinks this movie is ideally for.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm speaking for someone I don't know, but as somebody who makes art as a part of my life, I'm making it for myself.
Right,
it might be myself 20 years ago, but I'm making it for myself. Or for a version of me that needed it.
Right.
So
it's a tricky one, and there's a lot here. I know I keep randomly going back to the soundtrack, but it is really incredible.
It's not random, Andrea. It's you.
Well, I know, but I feel like I should have maybe
a person
saved it for the end. But just like,
I feel like we're there.
Okay,
we're kind of winding down,
and not all of these artists that are on the soundtrack, I think, are in the movie. I could be wrong about that, but I can't. That are on the like actual album soundtrack that you can purchase or stream. But Yule, I don't know if I'm saying their name right. Frances Quinlan, who is Hopalong, which is a Philly artist born and raised in Jersey, though. So we've got that Jersey connection, too. Caroline Polachek, Florist, Bartiche Strange, who I'm a big fan of. Maria BC, King Woman. Jason, Lorraine, The Weather Station, Drab Majesty. Proper, who I'm a big fan of a lot of these artists, but Proper was in our studio a few years ago. They're incredible. Saturn, King Woman, Sloppy Jane, featuring Phoebe Bridgers. Like, that is... it's a real who's who of like queer hipster artists.
Right.
So if you're looking for some new queer
Which
hipster
is why
music,
I don't know most of them, because I am like, give me the 90s pop punk and the like old lady
that's what's
queer
interesting
artists.
Too, though, because like
give me some Brandi Carlile and Melissa Etheridge.
But it would make sense for this movie to either only feature artists, kind of like when we watch Yellow Jackets, and most of the musicians, really all of them, are from the 90s when they're in the 90s or covering a song from the 90s in the 90s. That almost makes more sense for a movie like this. But Jane didn't do that because it's like, I really think the nostalgia of it is
not
supposed
a period piece.
Right.
That's the thing.
Yeah. And the nostalgia of it is, I think, supposed to be really, this is kind of contradictory, but really present. So you're supposed to feel like you're kind of stuck back there, but back there is now, not in the past.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Not to get too meta, but like if the person watching it is a queer person, there is this idea of like, you are in now, but you're not in now.
Totally.
And so it can be both. Like, if you look at it from a trauma therapy perspective,
right?
Like, one of the things a trauma therapist will say to you when you're like discussing something traumatic is they will remind you that it is not then, it is now. That you are in now. And that happened before. And like, when those two things mix, that's how trauma works. Like, you know, when you're not sure which is which, when you feel like you're then, but it's actually now.
Mm-hmm. And I think it would be a lot harder.
My therapist would be so proud of me making that connection.
Well, I think it would be a lot easier to put that separation there if all of these artists were either from 1998 or covering songs from 1998. But yeah. And that's like, that would be the easy way to handle this. But instead, it's all of these people. Like, these songs are called things like Big Glow, Psychic Wound, Green, Moonlight, Photograph. Proper song is called The 90s. Saturn's song is called How Can I Get Out? King Woman's song is called Bury. Sloppy Jane and Phoebe Bridgers' song is called Claw Machine. Mm-hmm. So it's, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think there's like a nice button to put on this because I think that I'm not done thinking about it. And I don't have a straightforward conclusion to my feelings about it. I think we have to find a way to neatly segue to the silliness that is about to come, and I'm not sure how we do that.
Well, this is a horror movie. The first week of October.
Yeah. Yeah. But we're not doing horror movies.
No, but we're leading in. It's our first spooky thing of the season.
But we're about to get silly again.
Yeah.
Which I'm happy about.
Yeah.
We definitely earned it. Not that we weren't silly last week with Pete and Pete, but we're going to get
that
silly
was homework,
in a different
though,
way.
And it was a serious assignment.
Right, of course. So it's in a very strange transition. Let's do a quick Dawson's Corner to take us from I Saw the TV Glow to what's next, which we'll talk about in a second. So I know you always want to know where I'm at. I am on season 5, episode 15.
Wait, okay.
Downtown Crossing. I know that you're waiting for me to get to something, and I'm wondering if I have passed it.
There's no way that you've passed it.
Are you sure?
You will know. It's just not until season 6. You will 100% know what I'm waiting for.
Okay. So I am currently on season 5, episode 15. Here are some things I don't like.
Okay.
I don't like Pacey and I lost Busy Phillips' character's name.
Audrey,
thank you. Together. They're adorable. Don't get me wrong. I like both of them very much. I just know that we're supposed to be rooting, at least in my world, for Joey and Pacey.
And it suffers a little bit, I think, from the thing of like, they're the two kind of like, not fuck ups, but the like.
Yeah, but they're like the. I don't know. Yeah. Like it. I understand why they put them together. I don't like it.
Right. It is a little lazy. You're right.
Another thing I don't like. Yet another inappropriate teacher-student relationship.
I hadn't thought about it.
Why does this keep happening?
By myself, but
there's literally a joke where Pacey is like, "Yeah, I've done this." I'm like, "No, you were a child. She's at least legal."
Right. This is still bad and stupid, but
it's a violation by the professor.
Yeah.
Ken Marino, get the fuck out of here.
Also, what a weird casting choice. And I like Ken Marino.
I do too. I texted you this. This is the third problem I have. They keep acting like he is Brad fucking Pitt.
I know.
He is Ken Marino.
I know.
What I do like, I do like the fact that they found a way to get everybody back in the same place, even though obviously they had to do some machinations that were maybe a little unnatural. Like suddenly Pacey decides not to go on another world trip because he's just going to hang out and work in a restaurant. Because everybody would choose working in a kitchen versus getting on a boat and sailing to Greece.
I know. I do like Pacey finding stuff that he's into, though. Like,
yeah. That's one of the things I think I do like is that he's less of a fuck up now. Like he can pay his rent. He has a job. He's good at his job, even though we never saw him do any cooking whatsoever until this. But whatever.
Maybe the boat.
Whatever.
He's
got a talent.
Yeah.
He's got a secret talent.
Maybe he had to learn at home, because you've met his family a little bit. I know we don't see much of them, but like he wasn't really nurtured, so.
Yeah, sure. I do like what Kevin Williamson, and maybe he went to an art school and this is where this is coming from, but his version of an art school in the 90s is hilarious.
No longer part of the show.
Oh,
by this point, but whoever,
Right. That's right.
He left after season 3, I think.
Whoever's writing season 5, I definitely don't. Okay, so I had texted you that like it would be really funny to me if they were referencing the school that I went to. Mm-hmm. I don't think they are. I think they're referencing something like Emerson, but there are some crossovers that I think are really funny to watch, like a on-screen version of, like, because there's lots of college TV shows out there. There's lots of shows of people in these types of situations. The art school thing isn't explored that much. It was one of the reasons I loved 6 Feet Under, even though I hadn't gone to art school yet, because of the plot of her going to art school. But it's
what school does she go to? Is it a real one?
No, it's Cal something. It's like it's supposed to be Cal Arts.
Gotcha.
But yeah, there's something fun about seeing at least a facsimile of that on screen. So
even if it's not the most
accurate, yeah. But it is fun to see, like, the thing that I think they're getting right about when they're in the college years is how within the city of Boston there is every kind of college you can possibly imagine right on top of itself, on top of each other. So there's their version of Harvard, there's their version of like whatever UMass Boston or whatever the Boston Bay College is supposed to be. There's the art school, like, that they can all exist in the same area. Yeah. It's true.
And if you'll remember Empire Records, when Corey is going to Harvard and then AJ decides he's going to go to art school in Boston so he can be close to her. So Boston is a real place for these kinds of stories to resolve themselves,
because there's so many options. Reason. I wonder if Boston Bay College is supposed to be... Yeah, but it's not quite the density. Mm-hmm. I wonder if Boston Bay College is actually supposed to be like a Northeastern kind of thing. That would make sense, because Northeastern has a hold on that section of town. Anyway, that was our Dawson's Corner for the week. We'll see where I'm at next week.
I just am realizing too, I always think of them as being in North Carolina because that's where it was filmed, but they all go away to school in the same state. Mm-hmm. They're not really away.
No, they're like an hour from home.
It's like if I went to, like, that's what not I even did. Like if I went to New Brunswick. It's like if I went to, like, TCNJ. Like, I could.
It's what I did. Except I commuted. But okay. One more thing. I know that Graham sold a house in a resort town and probably got a good amount of money. But even in the 90s, the size of the place that she has in Boston is a little absurd. There's just rooms everywhere. The rooms growing off of other rooms. Like, suddenly there's an extra room for this person and another one for this person. There's just tons of rooms.
Yeah, even
Boston is a very expensive city.
Off for who knows how long. Yeah, you're right.
Okay,
maybe
I had to get that off my chest.
Had like maybe she had took out a huge life insurance policy on Grams.
We know she didn't, because she was going to have to struggle to pay for Jen's education. That's why she moved with her to Boston. Mm-hmm. Do I need to educate you on Dawson's Creek, Andrea?
It's so funny that Grams moves to Boston.
I know. Like, what is she doing with her time? Where is she going?
I love her, and they knew that, so they needed her to be around more.
I mean, I guess she's like going to the symphony and going to the MFA.
Oh, I'll bet she's having a great time.
Yeah. So that was Dawson's Corner. That's where I'm at so far. So we should talk about what's coming next.
Right, we're leaving Dawson's Corner?
Well, not entirely.
Jody, I think next week this is your pick. So whatever you want to watch.
So, it's my pick within a structure that we have both agreed on, which is that for October, we're going to do Halloween episodes of TV shows.
Obviously.
And so, since I'm still watching Dawson's Creek, Andrea's never been happier.
No, I literally know. This is
the gift that this podcast has given you. Mm-hmm. We are going to watch a Halloween episode from Dawson's Creek, specifically the one that references Blair Witch.
Yeah, it's episode 7 of season 3. Okay. And it you don't need to have watched. I mean, you watched the pilot with us. You'll be fine.
Yeah. I mean, it's literally called Escape from Witch Island. Like, if you listen to our Blair Witch episode, this is basically like a ripoff on Blair Witch, but it's self-aware that it's a ripoff of Blair Witch. When I got to it in my watching, I was delighted because we had just, we watched Blair Witch, I guess, in the fall of last year at this point. And so it was a joy to watch a parody of it.
It's so fun. And I'm genuinely excited for listeners to watch a little more Dawson's Creek with us, because I love that pilot, but I don't think you watch that and you're like, oh, this is why Andrea loves it, has a dog named Pacey, and this is why this is the one show that Jody has randomly continued watching.
Of all the things.
Exactly.
Of all the things.
I think this episode is a really good example of where the charm for this show is, and I really think you get a better idea of my love for Pacey, and like it's just, I love this episode so much. I'm so excited.
Well, one of the things that we talked about, and I know that this may be after Kevin Williamson has left, I can't remember exactly when that happens, but one of the things that I think drew you to this show so strongly was its love of media and how much it references other movies and TV, and sometimes to the point of making an entire episode that is an homage to a certain thing, right?
Right.
And so this is one of those episodes.
Exactly.
So little synopsis. Dawson recruits Joey, Pacey, and Jen to be his guerrilla crew on a documentary for history class about Witch Island, a local spot shrouded in mystery for its reputation for being haunted by witches. Yeah. There's a subplot about Andy and her disciplinary committee, which I'm not as excited about, but that's okay.
What a show.
We promised we would be back to Dawson's Creek at some point, and so for October we're going to do, like I said, Halloween episodes of TV shows. We may not do any more that we've done before, but why not? Go back to the creek. I mean, it's going to be weird now for me. They're in college. I'm going back to high school.
I know.
They're going to age in reverse.
That's right. That's so funny that you got college kids now.
Yeah. Is there anything else you're watching that's interesting at the moment? I'm still watching Industry for some reason.
I love that.
Me and my show about corporate finance and the markets, I guess.
Yeah. No, I have not been watching anything new. I don't think. I don't remember the last thing the only real new TV I watch is on Dropout. It's all their improv shows, which are all so good, but they're everything's 20 minutes long and I can watch while I'm eating dinner between editing podcasts. But maybe I'll give Industry a whirl.
I have a section of my TV watching now that is I watch it so I can listen to the podcasters I like talk about it.
Yeah, I get that.
So, and it's usually the Prestige TV podcast or something on The Ringer, The Watch. They love Industry. They think it's the best thing ever. I don't quite understand why, but it's shiny and pretty and well acted.
Sometimes that's all I need.
Yeah.
Oh, I am reading a book that I really like so far.
What's that?
It's called Service Model, and it's by Adrian Tchaikovsky, who is a sci-fi writer, and it's about a service robot who I'm only a few chapters in, but I like it so much so far. It seems to be he's a service robot after humans are gone, so he's trying to figure out what his place is, and has clearly some willpower of his own, but is ignoring it, and is So it's so far it's very funny and clever, and the robot is very sweet.
Cute.
And it opens with a murder. So that's fun.
Always fun.
Yeah. So I recommend Service Model.
Is it an allegory?
It's an allegory.
An allegory?
It's an ambiguous allegory.
We should not record at night. If our listeners have any suggestions for their favorite Halloween episodes of TV shows, let us know.
I would love that.
We have a list that we're working from, but, things can change. If there's one that comes in that we're like, ooh, yeah, that's a great idea. So,
yeah, I would love some suggestions. If they want to send us suggestions, where should they send them?
Oh, they can find us on Instagram at WatchersPodNJ, or they can send us an email at WatchersPodNJ@gmail.com. They can find me on Instagram at Jody_Mim. You can send me a message there if you want as well, but probably better to send it to the Watchers stuff because I don't check my messages very often.
But do what's in your heart. I'm at AQ.
There we go.
Really, if you message probably any podcast on Instagram, there's a 50% chance it's one
that you're going to answer
that I monitor. So
that's probably true. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, we will see you guys on Witch Island next week.
See you there.
Bring your video camera.